So also for me, it's really wonderful to be here. It's I don't think you need to travel necessarily for spiritual growth, but it just is part of my service at the moment. And so I get to travel a lot in Europe and occasionally also in this country. And so one of the beauties, of course, is that you find that you have family everywhere. You just recognize the vibration, whether it's Seattle or the village or Palo Alto or Portland or meditation groups also. We came, before I came here, last Monday I arrived. I went with Uma, who is one of our senior ministers who lives at Ananda Assisi, and we traveled to England and we found family there. So it's really beautiful, and it allows us to go deep with each other and to reinforce, empower our connections and everything. So thank you for having me here.
One more intrusion.
Yeah.
Just because it's wandering upwards.
Yeah, I told you.
Okay, we'll try that.
All right.
We'll try that. All right, I'll leave you alone.
Okay. No, wouldn't. So, so first I would like to share, writing a book, of course, is an adventure. It's not a small adventure, and it's a beautiful adventure because it's also creative. And I have been writing already articles. We call them blogs. I also like to simply call them articles that I had published in the European Ananda website, anandaeurope.org. And it was based on the Holy Science, but then a very particular part of it that allowed me to have a more psychological approach. Because this book is obviously an extremely deep and powerful book. It's also very philosophical. But in the great masters, philosophy and psychology come together, but not necessarily in us, in disciples or in people who just want to grow spiritually. They need to know also how to apply the philosophy in their own inner life. You need to know how the mind works, how the feelings work, how the emotions work, and so forth. So there was one sort of something that I could refer to in this book, and that is when Swami Sri Yukteswar speaks about the heart and about the natural love of the heart and how that defines the degree to which that deeper layer, the deepest layer of feeling in our heart is developed, defines where we are with our consciousness, with our happiness and everything. So he then describes that there are certain tensions. He calls them meannesses, but others have called them tensions or impediments that make it difficult for us to connect with those deeper layers of love in our hearts. And he mentions 8 of them, like fear and shame and others, and we will go into some of these today together. He mentioned some of them, and so that made it for me like easier to start writing about him and about this book, because I had something that I know that people could relate to, unless you have never experienced fear in your life, or shame, or animosity, resentment, hurt, and so forth. So that was one reason. Okay. Then, of course, then I got the idea after I wrote also about the stages of the heart. So Sri Yukteswar says that we grow in stages, like in education for life. You have certain periods, timelines in your life when one particular issue, you might call it, becomes important, plays the main actor. And then you focus on that, and then when you're ready, you move on to the next stage. So there was also something that was a good an interesting way to start and something that we can all relate to. He speaks about the dark heart, then the propelled heart when you become enthusiastic about things, and then the steady heart and so forth, okay? That was another reason. And then I was thinking, when I started writing the book, I talked about it with the Crystal Clarity publishers, with Narayan and Dharma Devi, who run it, and they were very enthused about the idea of having a book about that. And of course, as publishers always do, they give you way too short a time spent to finish it. It has to be finished by okay. So, and then of course you never have time to write, so that's another one. I think I wrote it in August, which in our guest retreat is the busiest period of the year, and I still don't know how it happened, but it somehow just happened. And so I didn't just copy the articles, I elaborated, edited them, and added also other text and so forth, and I tried to make one union of the whole book. But I was praying, because when you write for somebody, and I felt very much connected with, I don't know if you can use that word, the American psyche in some way. So one thing that I've always admired about America is that in the Constitution it mentions the word happiness. Not in the Constitution, but in the Declaration of Independence, and that is an important document, and it's in the DNA of the history of this country. They say the pursuit of happiness. I don't think there's any constitution in the world where that is mentioned. And so, of course, one of our guidelines at Ananda is that we look at humanity and every individual that we meet in our life, and also every individual that we don't meet in our lives, they're all looking for happiness. And we have assimilated our guru's definition of happiness, which is Satchidananda, okay? Bliss, deep bliss that always exists, is always there, it's always new. But not everyone understands that. So in order to get there, you need wisdom. And so I thought that, I think it's a subtitle also. Well, it's on the back cover. The pursuit of happiness is through wisdom. And so I prayed and I asked Sri Yukteswar, can I just write about you? Isn't that a little, presumptuous? Because he lived apparently a secluded life. He never left India. He spent most of his time between his ashram in Serampore near Calcutta and in Puri, the Gulf of Bengali, and very rather secluded. He didn't have many disciples. People knew him and they came to him, but because he was so difficult, such a difficult guru to be with, they just ran away after. But there were a few things that made me feel that I could try. And then, you just try and you do it, and then, the rest is in your hands, and do with it what you want to. One was that Sri Yukteswar was very interested in the West. So, first of all, he is the main character of Autobiography of a Yogi. The main character, if you think of it. It's not Yogananda. Yogananda writes about himself, but he writes much more about his guru. If you want to know more about Yogananda, you have to read the Path, the New Path. Okay? That is all. That is not so much about Swami Kriyananda, that is about Yogananda. So he's the main character, and that book has been a spiritual bestseller for generations by now. It came out in 1946, and God knows how many editions there have been, So he is known all over the world, but in a very discreet, intimate way. So it's not like a celebrity. Okay, where you look at the outside glamour. There is something, he's just a present, I'm sure, in many, many people's lives. That's one thing. So I thought, yeah, I can write and think of a single mom in Chicago having a terribly stressed life, or another person struggling with alcohol, and another person, I don't know, getting burnt out, and I can write for those people and bring your, ask that you use me as a channel and bring your love to them, because he's interested in the West. And how do I know that? I just realized it later. So Kriya Yoga, as we can read in Autobiography of a Yogi, is sent to the world through Lahiri Mahashaya. Okay, so he meets his guru, Babaji. He is sent back down to his family to resume his duties as a householder, and then in the evening people come to his little house in Varanasi. And so he is the first, definitely, but his activities are only in India. Okay, then maybe 10 years after his first discipleship initiation, Sri Yukteswar visits Allahabad, the Kumbh Mela, and there he too meets Babaji. And this time Babaji gives him too an instruction, namely write a book in which he gives him two instructions. One is write a book that shows the underlying unity between Eastern religion and Western religion, between Christianity and Sanatana Dharma and Hinduism, if you like. That's one thing. So Sri Yukteswar was eminently suited for that because he had studied the Bible. He knew Christ. And he could do that. And then the other one was, I'm going to send you a student, a disciple, for training. So there you have it. He was the first master to reach out to the West. And even though it is done in a rather, sober and at the same time difficult way, because it's not an easy book to read, still there is a lot of power, an incredible power in this book. I had written something. Yeah. So even in the first 2 pages, not of the introduction. In the introduction, he writes about the yugas and everything. But in the first pages of the first chapter, he writes about God being a substance. Isn't that wonderful? Because that's what we all want in life. We want substance. Whether you define it as a lot of food, good food, or drinking, or whatever you define it, still what you're looking for is substance. A substance that satisfies, that gives lasting satisfaction, right? So he says, man possesses eternal faith and believes intuitively in the existence of a substance. The problem is that he perceives that we perceive that substance only through our nose, through our tongue, through our hands, through our ears, and through our eyes, and through our, I think I mentioned the nose, right? Okay. So he then explains that there are ways to develop a better perception of that substance, and that comes when you develop your heart, the quality of intuition, when you learn to add a fifth sense. And he says you have to withdraw your energy from the surface of your body. You have to go very deep and deeper, and then you will taste that substance in a way that you will not lose it anymore. And you will always, it's not right to say you will always be satisfied, but it's good to say there will be eternal satisfaction for you. Okay. And then, right there, on the first or second page, he quotes from the Bible. And he says, so he writes a sutra in Sanskrit, and then Self-Realization Fellowship has translated those. Then he gives a comment, and then usually he writes something parallel. It's basically what we do every Sunday service. We do the opposite. We usually begin with the Bible and end with the Bhagavad Gita, but the procedure is very similar. And so so after he has written about this substance, which I find majestic, Scripture, if you take time for it, can really give you a lot of nourishment. Even if you don't need to understand it. You don't even need to try to understand it. All you need to do is just read a few lines and then allow it to enter your heart. That's all you need to do, okay? And then you can get back to your detective story or whatever. So at the end, he says, after this verse, he says, now faith, he quotes the Bible, he quotes the Apostle Paul, and says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen or not seen. Think of it. This is already beautiful for us who are on the pursuit of happiness, in pursuit of happiness. Because when you hope for something, okay, there is an optimism in our hearts. And what we hope for something that will make us happy, right? But faith is the substance of that hope. So if that substance is there already in your heart, then time becomes unimportant. You don't need to wait for your dream to be fulfilled. The substance of that fulfillment is already in your heart. And that he calls faith. I don't know, but I find that thrilling. Okay, you don't need to worry about the future. The substance of what you hope for is already in your heart. And then he also quotes Jesus, saying, Then said Jesus unto them, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he. So here he is saying, Son of Man is our humanity. It is our subconscious mind. We are probably, I don't know, you can correct me, but for 90% or 80% guided or influenced by our subconscious mind, and then 10% maybe by our conscious mind, and then if we do our best, there's time for intuition. And that will be our superconscious mind, and that's what we want. We can receive lots of inspiration and creativity and all those things, but we need to lift up the Son of Man. We need to, and he goes on, he says how that works, okay? But we'll get to that a little later. So that was another reason why I think, you can write about this book, you can ask this master to enter the houses of the people in the metropole, in Chicago and New York and Portland and so forth. Okay. I would like to actually at this point read a little page from my book about scripture, because it is part of our work as disciples. We need to read, we need to draw inspiration. We need a higher inspiration that we can use for our introspection. And I need to find this, just a second. Let me just put all the other books away for a second. Can't even find my own book, what I've written. What a shame. No. Okay, a little further. Otherwise, it is not meant to be. Okay, so can't find it. Maybe it's in the, yeah, I found it. So, so this is just to inspire us, not only you, but also myself, okay? To do this part, to have this in your life. You already have it, but to also to give it more like focus. So personally, I've always liked reading literature. And then I've written, true scripture is probably the most powerful form of literature. My first encounter with Scripture happened at a very young age. By closing my eyes, I can still relive that experience. I am sitting in my father's armchair. My body is the body of a child. There's no one else at home, and my only companions are perfect silence and a book that I found in my father's bookcase. I am reading Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. My child mind tries to decipher the ancient words printed on those old thin pages. Conscious comprehension of this magnificent passage eludes me, and yet I am transported. I sense myself standing behind the vibrant orator, feeling the power that emanates from his body as he addresses his disciples. Now, I don't know if you have ever dived into your own memories, childhood memories, and see where there were pivotal moments, like, I think you can call them epiphany or something where something important happened, okay? And I was alone, so I wasn't playing with friends. There was not, it was not a relationship that ended or a friend that betrayed me or I betrayed the friend. It was nothing of that. It was exactly what I wrote now. And when I read it and I close my eyes, it's as if it's happening right now. So just sometimes if we want to go deeper, we don't need to look for more. We can also just remember what we already have and then dive into our memories. Okay, so then not the subtitle, but on the back cover, it says, "The pursuit of happiness goes through wisdom." Okay, so this seems very obvious, and I thought it's nice because it connects with the American Constitution, and it can give people something to strive for without thinking, oh, it's way too high up there. You can, if you start from psychology, and that we will see soon, if you start from where you are, emotionally, physically, mentally, then, and you accept that, then you can make another step forward. But it is also important to have a goal, right? So overcoming something can be a goal, and it becomes easier when you define the goal as happiness, for example, in this case bliss, freedom, inner freedom, or the development of wisdom. So what is wisdom? We can also ask ourselves first, okay? It is not studying Scripture. So now I'm going to contradict myself. You don't become wise by studying Scripture. It may help you to study a little bit and then you absorb it. But wisdom is only wisdom if it really changes you from within. It changes your heart, okay? And for me, in my life, the golden question that has always helped me to stay in touch with this process of developing wisdom, of nurturing wisdom, has always been the question, what am I supposed to learn from this or that situation? So I've had my own share of drama in my life and difficulties, and it still can happen still. But now, even when it's like a ripple, I try to withdraw and say, what do you want me to learn from this? Okay, and then and community life, by the way, is an excellent testing ground for these things. Because it's not only that you learn, situations are not only difficult because other people are difficult, but it's also situations are difficult because your reactions, your own reactive process brings you in trouble. Okay, and you just don't understand. This person irritates me. That person attracts me. Whatever it is, the own reactions are already puzzle you and confuse us. So whether it's something that's difficult financially, you're in financial trouble, or you're in relationship trouble or health trouble, just ask the golden question to Divine Mother. We can talk about Divine Mother. You can also say, ask it to the universe, and then listen. So what am I supposed to learn from this? So the answer will not come with angels, a vision with angels who come to you and they say, thou must learn more self-control. That will not happen. But you, or actually might happen. This has never happened to me. Sorry. But something good will happen. Something, something that makes you evolve. And it can be, you have to try to listen. That's why it's good to meditate. You just calm yourself and you enter listening mode, and you have to be a little courageous because sometimes what you hear or what you see is not always very pleasant. But you just continue to listen, and then you will grow. And with the growth, there will be joy. That's also very nice, because even though it hurts to grow sometimes, there's always something within you that rejoices, because finally you can let go of this nonsense that has been gnawing at your heart for ages. And there is always, and it can be subtle, but even if it's subtle, then it's good to meditate, because then you can hold on to it. Okay? So in wisdom then also feeling and reason come together. Feeling and reason coming together is when you speak. It's like ideas, when real ideas, they come from a higher realm. They come what Sri Yukteswar calls the causal world. We tune into them, and then good ideas come to us. This happens when we are in a creative flow. And creativity, by the way, is not only the arts. It can be, in your household management, can be when you're a parent or a brother or a sister or your manager. Whatever you do, there can be creativity. There can be great ideas coming from the causal world. Okay? And when you express them, it will never be dry. There will always be feeling. So that is where feeling becomes reason, and reason becomes feeling. And there's a lot of happiness in that as well. So I'm going to step a little bit ahead now. So one of the meannesses that Sri Yukteswar mentions, the meannesses of the heart, is racial prejudice. Okay, and I've written there. So what is the reason? How does it get a hold on us? And so we can go back into that later. But one of the things that I've written is that when people have political conversations or political positions, that they have strong opinions, they talk and they think that they are expressing ideas. But in reality, they are expressing emotions. Okay, so deeper emotions in the subconscious mind, they dress up as ideas. And then you say, oh yeah, the white race, like Europeans have thought. It's not only white supremacy, it's not an American phenomenon, started in Europe. Okay, alas, centuries of colonialism, about the idea that the white skin makes me superior to people who have another color of skin. Okay, that's not an idea. That's just an emotion of stupidity, of reactivity, of selfishness, especially selfishness, because it's comfortable, right? I can go. My country went to Indonesia in the 17th century, and with people armed, and they just started taking away whatever they could use. It's a crime, but it's true. It just happened, okay? So what is the emotion? Is that an idea? And then they started trying to convert them to true religion, Christianity. Is that an idea? No. It's an emotion dressed up as an idea. The emotion, like I said, can be selfishness, can be greed, Okay, it can be cruelty, it can be anything. Okay, so daily we have to, in our pursuit of happiness through wisdom, okay, we have to enter the realm of pure ideas. There is an affirmation of Yogananda that says, "My dreams of perfections are the bridges that carry me to the realm of pure ideas." Okay? So when we try daily to get a little calmness in our hearts and to reach that state, then good ideas will come and they will bring us again a lot of happiness. So, what are the tools of wisdom? Okay, the most important tool is to learn discernment. Okay, it's called in Sanskrit, it's called viveka. Okay, so where we can distinguish not only between what is real and what is false, but also between what is natural and what is unnatural. Okay, because he speaks about the natural love of the heart. Okay, so our true nature, our deeper nature, is love. Okay, so viveka or discernment then helps us to understand what is not real. Like, for example, it's not so very difficult when you are a 17th century colonialist, okay, and you start thinking, is this natural what I'm doing here? Plundering other people's, does this make me happy? Does this give me real satisfaction? Or do I want more and more and more? And am I happy to see that family suffer because I've taken away their land and things like that? It's not so difficult. Most people don't want to do it. But now as a humanity, we are ready to do it. We are inspired people. And so it's not natural, okay? Natural is deep. And I remember when I read when I started studying Swami Kriyananda's Raja Yoga classes, and he spoke about yama and niyama, he always said it is to become more natural. Why do you need to control your speech? Or why do you need to control your actions so that you don't harm other people? Because then you can get in touch with your deeper nature. Isn't that wonderful? It's what we really are. So it's also, and that's what we really want to be. What we really want to be is what we really are. So we just need to get rid of the conditionings that we have put on ourselves over who knows how many lifetimes, incarnations. He says that removal of these 8 meannesses, I can quickly read them so you get an idea. We will not go deeper into each one of them, but he says hatred, shame, fear, grief, condemnation. When I read them, now I'm going to read them again, just look inside and see what reaction it triggers in your heart. Okay, so hatred, shame, fear, grief, condemnation, meaning judging other people, race prejudice, so racism, pride of pedigree, when you're proud of being part of a clan, a family, whatever, community, a narrow sense of respectability, smugness, presumption. Okay, so those are the 8 meannesses that he mentions. And then he says you can overcome them through introspection. Introspection is the practice of wisdom. So the tool of wisdom is discernment, okay, to distinguish between what is true and what is false. The practice is introspection. And we will go deeper into how that works with... but then he says the other one is pranayama. Okay, we've just sung it. Pranayam be thy religion, pranayam will give thee salvation. Pranayam is the wishing tree. While I was chanting it now, I thought, wow, so all I need to do is practice pranayam, and whatever needs I have will be fulfilled. I was talking with a person recently who had become a widow, and by now, some years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and now he's ready for another relationship. There is this feeling of longing of company in his heart, and I can understand that. Only he has a certain age, he's in his 70s, I think, and it's not so easy to find something, and it will never be like what he had before. So you think, pranayam, pranayam is the wishing tree. Just persevere. And for us, I guess for each one of us who's following, pranayam means Kriya Yoga, right? So pranayam will also, and that is then the first meanness, whatever you want to call it, that I'd like to focus on, help us also to deliver us from fear, okay? So fear is a terrible emotion, can take on many shapes. There are people who are afraid of going out their houses. There are people who are afraid for small spaces, people who have stage fright. Also, there can be nameless fears, I'm just scared, stop. Okay? And you can go through life like that. It's not easy. Okay? You can overcome it, but it's not easy. Okay? So the core, and this is a nice story that I would like to share with you about Nitai. Nitai is the founder, for those who don't know him, he's the founder of Education for Life schools. In the history of Ananda, he's the historical founder of the first living wisdom school based on Education for Life. And he's a man of very few words. I mean, there was someone who had passed away at Ananda, and there were speakers. And there was one speaker who spoke to commemorate this person. One speaker spoke for like 20 minutes. I think he spoke for 3 minutes. That's Nitai, okay? He's just a man of few words. But for Christmas, he sends a gift to his friends worldwide. And one time I found it so original. He wrote a letter in which he says, I have always been a very great admirer of the 12 steps program. Okay, so which is originally for alcohol, but now it's used for all sorts of addictions. Only his problem was that he didn't have any particular addiction, so he was an admirer of it, but he didn't really need it to get rid of alcohol because he didn't drink and he didn't gamble or stuff like that. So, but then he realized, no, I am addicted. Guess what? Well, he was born into a human body. That's a stupid thing to do. Why did he do that? Because he was addicted to being born in a human body. And look at reality through the 5 senses and missing the substance, not being able to drink fully from the substance that we've spoken about before. So then he said, okay, so I'm attached. There is attachment to the body. So there is addiction to having a body. If there were no addiction to having a body, I would not be afraid of death. Okay, there would be no fear. Because the root cause of all fear is attachment. Okay, so you hold on to things, the mind, the heart, the psyche, and sometimes the trouble is that sometimes we think that we have overcome fear. But I was on an airplane, not now, but I was flying to Holland, and there was a lot of turbulence, and I never thought that I would be afraid, but I was afraid, like this, and I didn't like it at all, was it? So you think that you're free of fear, we think, and then all of a sudden it pops up again. That's one of the tricky things about fear, isn't it? But in the meantime, we can work on it. So when I met Swami Kriyananda, this was when I was 24, and I had my violin with me, and it was on the eve of his birthday, his 59th birthday. It was in 1985. And a friend gave me music that he had written. In those days, the Ananda music, there was no department or ministry, or there weren't that many musicians who could perform Swami's music. So he was always happy when a musician came and could do it. And for me, it came so natural to play that Romanian music that were, in fact, at the end, I would like to play one little piece that I didn't play exactly that one for him, but it was the type of music that I play for him. And then, but I was a young boy, and I was extremely, with a lot of insecurities and complexes in my, I was very clear in my search. I wanted absolutely learn to meditate and find God. That was clear. But at the same time, psychologically, I had a lot of kinks, you know, a young boy. Do you say that? Complexes. So I asked for his patience, and I had a talk with him, and I said, yeah, you know, Swami, I have this and I have that, and I have terrible stage fright when I have to play the violin. And he said, oh, well, he said two things. Just continue to play and practice pranayama. Now, the pranayama that he then gave me was just, I think it's called Nadi Shodhana, where you do alternate breathing, inhaling through the one nostril and exhaling through the other, and so forth. And so, but later he gave me Kriya Yoga, okay? And I came to realize that when you practice pranayama, okay, and in this case Kriya Yoga, so he says, pranayam be thy religion, but he means Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga be thy religion, more specifically, right? You won't have to fear anything anymore. That's what he says at the end. Just continue, just do it, just do it. So he said, Swami then said to me, continue to play, don't stop, because if you stop, then of course, then you have not overcome anything. And practice do this pranayama. And then it became do kriya, and I vowed, like all of us have done, I made a vow, I'll practice it daily. And then the road towards freedom of fear had begun. Isn't that wonderful? And even though I cannot say I'm completely free of fear, I couldn't say that, it doesn't make sense to say it. But I can say that I know that that is the way to go. Pranayam will give thee salvation. Pranayam is the wishing tree. It weans the ego, the soul away from the ego. It's like also Hong So in that sense is pranayama. You practice Hong So, and gradually that grip that the ego has on the heart just loosens up a little bit, and so there's a little bit more freedom there. Okay. So, and then I've also written about in the chapter about fear that non-attachment, okay, that we develop through practice, through pranayama, but also through introspection and self-honesty and all those things, also makes us better actors on the stage of life, okay? Because it's like, and the example that I give is when you have an actor who has to act, for example, fear on stage, okay? And then he feels real fear. All of a sudden he is overcome by stage fright. And so what happens, you know, blockage and all sorts of things. He can't do his acting anymore at that point. Because if he acts it well, then he's free enough. That part, you know, he can act fear or being the bad guy or being the good guy, whatever it is. But there is that freedom from attachment that allows that energy, that creativity to flow uninterruptedly. You see what I mean? So the more we develop, the more that non-attachment happens through us, through all the means that we said, pranayama, service, introspection, and so forth, the better actors. We become our real self, basically, and that's beautiful, right? So at this point, before I move on, I've said so many things. I would like to see if you have any questions about this. And I'm going to take some water. Questions, not only questions, but also comments. Not all together. Yes, I will repeat the question for the people at home.
Just having my own reflections about just the value of pranayama and calming the heart and using it through every part of your life, including your work and career. And I think it's not like something that should be separate. Do you want me to use the mic?
Yeah, let's do that. Because then I don't need to repeat you. People can hear your own words, which is better, I think. Like this. So I'm giving him the mic, right? Sorry, just a second. Yeah.
I guess I'm having my own reflections just about the value of pranayama and Kriya Yoga in like a person's career, for example. And I think sometimes maybe there's a thinking that like spiritual life is separate or, somewhat separate from your worldly life. But I'm curious for yourself how maybe that showed up for you also in pranayama, in the work you did after you were 25 years old. So were there other instances in your life where you experienced those types of letting go or transcending fear and things like that?
Thank you. Personally, so when I met Swami in Como in northern Italy, I had already studied his Raja Yoga and I tried to meditate. And one of the things that I felt was that he was pulling me into this path, right? Or pulling me to become a part of Ananda. And in the beginning, I felt, you have to remember that in those days, this was completely new. So I came there, I knew how to meditate, didn't know how to, the chanting I didn't know anything about, and I saw pictures everywhere, I was taken to my room and I saw pictures, and it was all very new to me, and so I didn't jump into it like that, okay? And then I could feel he was just kind and friend and loving and joyful and everything. But I could feel that his spiritual eye was upon me, and he was like drawing me. And I felt for myself that I had to go back to Holland after a few months to finish my studies, but also to solve a few things. Psychological kinks that I needed to solve in myself. Because maybe, I'm not sure, there might be a difference between the American psychology or psyche and the European psyche. Because America is a young country, and so a very sincere individual here can find a life philosophy and embrace it immediately without any burden of the past or influence of the past. And in Europe, that is not the case. So even the idea of a community, I found that a little threatening. They had already taken me in the staff there in Como, and then when we wrote newsletters, said, no, that's too much. I was very, I was young after all and inexperienced. So I went back to Holland. I finished my studies, and I did certain forms of pranotherapy, psychotherapy. And then I moved to Italy, and there I got married and I had children, and I worked to support my family, and I started an Ananda meditation group. Because at that point I was very close to Assisi. I went very often. Ananda had then moved to Assisi. Swami was there for 7 years, and I went there regularly, and he came to Rome, and so... But the integration, I don't know if that is your question, the career part, etc., I've never felt that as really a contradiction. And it shouldn't be, because this is not a path for where you withdraw from the world. Some of Ananda's greatest benefactors don't even live in a community. And I'm talking about financial support that they give, which is, it's much bigger. The family is much bigger, and you can be, chief executive of a big corporation, or you can be a nurse in a hospice, or whatever your job is, and be a yogi in the deepest sense of the word. Is that an answer to? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I was just curious about, I guess, your own, as you were in your career and stuff, how you continue to, maybe how pranayama continue to integrate for you.
Yeah, so it always happened. Once I got Kriya Yoga, I never stopped doing that. And at a certain point when I was divorcing from the mother of my children, which was extremely difficult for me, I didn't want it. She wanted it, so can't control other people. And so the feeling was I'm not losing only her, I'm losing, the project. I have 2 kids, like the family. I'm losing my family. So there was a very, like an ancient type of sadness that I had. And of course hurt and anger and all that stuff. But I was also the leader of the meditation group. And I had already had Kriya Yoga, and that just continued every day. I went there. I was teaching English to business people in Rome, and we had a center. I had the key. So whenever I had time, I would go there, and there was a friend of mine. Sometimes he was there too, and then we meditated together, even just half an hour. And it was in that period that Swami decided to make me a light bearer. God knows why, you can think, because I wasn't. But at the same time, later, looking back, reflecting back, I realized that Kriya Pranayam, which will give us salvation, which is we don't need to fear anything anymore, which is our wishing tree. It was always there as a hidden underground river. So I experienced myself in layers. Okay, at a certain layer there was, like I just said, pain and hurt and sadness and all those stuff. On a deeper level, there wasn't. And on a deeper level, I was the most functional person because I did that well. I felt how to do that. Guiding a meditation group and teaching, etc. That came to me. So, okay? Yes. I'm going to give you the mic.
Can you talk a little bit about how grief is a meanness of the heart?
Yeah. I hope I can. Because that is very strange. Why would grief be a meanness of the heart? Now, we've all read Autobiography of a Yogi, and there is a lot of grief in the book, and it's a powerful grief. It's not something, because everything that a master does, there is no mediocrity in the life of a master. So whatever happens will happen with full blast of intensity, and his mother dies, and he's, I think, 11 years old. Now he wants to throw himself under a train. Do you remember that? Yeah. And then he says, it took me years to overcome that. Her eyes had been, the world seemed completely devoid, is that a word, of meaning. There was no meaning. Those eyes had gone. I didn't want to be here anymore. So he did not, that is the humanity of a master. Okay, a master would not be an inspiring example for us if there weren't humanity. Okay, but then you have to look at what he does with it. So he says, I was storming the gates of heaven. Okay, he knew that the real mother cannot be mortal. The real mother has to be there always, the divine mother. And so he started praying for years, and then, I'm not telling the whole story now, but then he attracts, a great devotee of Divine Mother who intercedes for him, and then he has a vision, and then he says that from that moment on, the pain was gone completely. Okay, she comes to him and she says, always have I loved thee, Ever shall I love thee? I have loved thee, nurtured thee through the breast of many mothers. I have looked at you lovingly through the eyes of many mothers. And so that was gone forever. Okay? The 12th step. So, but then we get back to that. But then why does he call grief a meanness? Whereas it's so natural, grief is always about loss of some type, right? Or sometimes it's a feeling of loss. Okay, you walk around and you just miss something is missing, and you experience grief. And what I came to understand, what my understanding of it is, and I've written it in my book, is that there is mental grief and emotional grief. So emotional grief is just there, and it's natural. Okay, so you let it be. When it comes, and then it goes away because life continues. But that is natural, and that is not a meanness of the heart. Okay, but then there is an example of Yogananda. There had been some service maybe, and after that there was maybe coffee and tea, and people were chatting like we do at Ananda. And there was this woman who was sharing with a small group of people about an operation, surgery that she had undergone, and it was so hard for me. It was just so hard for me, and it was something with her leg had broken her. And Yogananda overheard it and joined the group and said, "When did that happen?" And she said, 27 years ago. So what she did, I think, was keeping the grief alive with her mind. And that is not necessary. That, or let me put it that way, that we can work on. So, to give you an example, has anyone of you seen the movie Collateral Beauty? It was with Will Smith. Came out maybe, I don't know. You have seen it? Yeah, 10 years ago. Pardon? You own it. Okay, you can go to Renaissance bookstore. You can take orders. So Will Smith, okay, he lost his daughter. You don't even want to think about that, but that's the story. He loses a little daughter, and he and his wife, as often happens, they experience the grief the mourning in different ways. So they separate, okay, and he spirals down basically. He can't handle it. But at a certain point, he comes back to his wife, and she has, of course, had the same loss, but she's doing better than he. And she explains how, first of all, she had been looking for help, so she became part of another group of people who had had the same experience. So that already makes a difference. And then she learned at a certain point the difference between grief and depression is not the same. Okay, people can be depressed without having lost anything. Do you agree with that? So she said, first of all, grief comes to every human being at one point in his or her life. That is inevitable because we lose our parents, we can lose our job, whatever it be. And then she said, but when you lose touch with little things of life that have a beauty, an intrinsic beauty, like a sunset, or someone smiles at you, or someone does something kind for you, or your dog, or your cat, or whatever it be, okay, then at that point, you can discipline yourself and take that into your own hands. That's not repressing. That is to say, you have to train yourself to look at collateral beauty, the collateral beauty of life. So it's a very creative title because collateral, that term is used in war, in the military language, when they bomb, let's say, an arms depot, and they try to destroy that, but then 10 civilians die, and that is then called cynically collateral damage. but she talks about collateral beauty. Okay, and there we can focus on that. But I have to say that then I also give a few strategies, let's say, to work with grief. And you don't work on the heart, you work on the mind. You keep the mind under control gradually. You accept the heart, whatever the heart feels, it feels. But the mind doesn't need to go there every time at a certain point. In the beginning, yes. Certain point, maybe not. So I wrote, for example, that it sometimes helps not to talk about it all the time. So you just stop talking about it. You talk about other things. You talk about what other people want to talk about. Or instead of talking, you listen, whatever it be, okay? That can be of help. And it can also be of help to eliminate the pronoun I or me. So you don't say, I am grieving, but you can say, there is grief. What difference does that make, in your opinion? Pardon? You impersonalize it, and that has a freeing effect on the heart. Okay, so when I said that, and I was giving a class about this subject in Italy, in Assisi, and there was actually an American lady, and she said, no, I don't accept that. I mean, impersonalizing it, I'm just not ready to do that. So it's a process. But if you want to work on it actively, you can work with your mind and you can work with your thoughts. So, for example, I had a friend, and all of a sudden she turned against me, okay? And I was deeply hurt. I thought she was a real friend, and I had lost my friend. And so I talked about it with other people, and at a certain point, it was getting on their nerves that I was continuously talking about. So she said, can you stop giving it energy, please? And so I got the lesson. I said, stop giving it energy. Okay? Does that make any sense, Valerie? Okay. Any comments on this? Because this is an important subject. Yes. Oh dear, you gotta have the limelight. What is your name? Ladies and gentlemen. Kathy, hey.
In my life, I've found that there is missing someone. Legitimately, I have a picture of them, and I look and I miss a little bit, but I know that is all about me. And, being on this path, I can wish them well at the time. So that takes away story around the missing, so I don't, encumber myself with a bunch of stuff around it, and stay in the past about it. And I have found that helpful. And so at this stage of life, I'm telling my children, you're going to miss me, but you need to turn me loose. When it's time, it's time, and you need to let me go. And I'm not minimizing your sadness, but I am letting you know that I'm going to fly,
Thank you very much for sharing it. Yes, Amrita.
I guess it's all further goes. Okay. So after I told this to Hahnemann, after my husband Jamie passed, I went on the pilgrimage to Italy and Spain. Remember that one in 2018? And I didn't want to have people ask me, how are you doing, and all that, and pat me on the shoulder and all that, because I couldn't take it. And so I just said, whoever I was sitting next to, I'd say, did you ever have a grief like this? And every time they had a grief just like mine. Their son died. It was just on and on. Their son died. They had a divorce. They didn't know about it. Their husband died. Their wife died. It just went on, and that helped me so much. And yeah, so someday I'll write a book about all those experiences, because it was very beautiful, and it helped me a lot to get through that time, because it only was 3 months. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, I just want to say that's probably personalized it for me.
Yeah. Listening to others as well.
Thanks for sharing. And I think what I'm really benefiting from is just listening to your own, personalization of the techniques and how you do, get through, stay the course and stay tied to that inner river that carries us through, be it the breath or the practice. And I think something that comes up when anybody is dealing with anything like Hanuman brought up as far as, grief or any of what we may consider to be the negative emotional states, and that is vigilance and awareness and staying so close to your consciousness that you can see when that goes from just the sweeping feeling that's going to pass through like a storm or like a wave versus an indulgence. And we're so, we're such children in the desire to indulge. And
I'm not.
and it feels so good. And whether it be anger or grief or sadness or sometimes hope. And that indulgence, really pulls us away from that peace. And when it comes as a feeling versus as a thought that's really teasing that feeling, let the feeling come and go, but if it's a thought, it's a choice to indulge or not. And just stay that vigilant. That's what's seen me through.
Thank you very much also for giving that word indulgence. It hasn't come to me so far, but it is definitely relates very deeply to what we're talking about. At this point, I would like to say a few words about introspection, and you will see that it ties in with what you say, because basically, and meditation, these two go together. So when we sit down to meditate, we make a commitment to the present, to be in the present, don't we? Really, we do, okay? In the latest letter that Devi sent, she quoted from Winnie the Pooh. Did any one of you read that? What's your favorite day? Pooh says to, I think, Piglet, today. Oh, yeah, that's my favorite. So that sums up the secret of meditation. So the class is finished. So when we start meditating, of course, we're not only dealing with the conscious mind, okay? So we're also dealing with the subconscious mind. The purpose is to bring the mind on a focus, it can be the breath, it can be the spiritual eye, it can be Kriya Yoga, to a focus that continuously brings it back to the here and now, ever more deeply. But when you sit down and things come up from the subconscious mind, what do? Okay, you get up and you start making coffee and go to work. Not when you want to make more progress, you just stay there. You don't indulge, and that's what I wanted to say. That's why I'm grateful you used that word. You don't indulge, you sit it out. So basically, Swami Sri Yukteswar has a new translation for the word tapasya. Tapasya is usually translated as austerity, right? Stern discipline. You know how he translated it? Patience. Holy patience. and also patience with the subconscious mind. So you sit there, okay, and then, because I don't know who of you also teaches meditation. So you teach, so when you do that and you work with people who do that for the first time, you explain, okay, the technique, and then you guide them, and then the second class, and then by the time you reach the fifth class, you want them to experience a longer meditation, maybe 20 minutes or something. So you say that. You say, okay, now I'm going to guide you a little bit in the beginning, and then we're going to dive into the silence together, and then I will guide you out of the meditation at the end. And then 9 out of 10, you will find that people at the end say, yeah, but I had all these thoughts coming up. You know, how did it go? Well, it was difficult because I had all these thoughts coming up. Yes, of course, thoughts come up. And if you hadn't sat down to meditate, you wouldn't even know that those thoughts were there. Isn't that so? So it is a little bit like a very restless dog. Okay, so suppose I want to go and visit a friend and discuss something important with him. And so I arrive, and the friend just has a puppy. It's just taking a puppy, and the puppy just so happy to see me, jumps on me, and I play a little bit with him, but I didn't come for him. So I came for my friend. So we sit down, he makes coffee. What is the best way? And the dog continues to demand my attention. What is the best way to, did you say ignore? Yeah, just ignore him. Completely. So be strong in ignoring him. And then you will find that a few minutes later he falls asleep on your foot. And then you can have your conversation with your friend, right? So that is one thing. And the other thing is acceptance, self-acceptance. So we say every Sunday we read the Festival of Light, and we say, the new coin for redemption is calm acceptance and joy. So calm acceptance is not an easy thing. It's not passive. You have to remind yourself that you have to accept honestly and with calmness where you are. Okay? So it can become, the subconscious mind can become like a vicious circle. So you sit down, calmness, calm acceptance. Okay, so I need to be calm. Sit down, and you say, but I'm not really all that calm. And so you start feeling inadequate or guilty because you're not feeling all that calm. And so now you're feeling guilty, but then the instructions is no. Calm acceptance and joy. Just don't worry. Be calm also when you're not calm. And then you feel guilty because you're not calm because you're not calm. And it can go on and on and on like that. But if you want to simplify it, you just say, okay, calm acceptance and joy. I need to work on acceptance. That is there. And now I focus on the breath or on the kriya or whatever it is, on devotion. And if the thoughts come back and they lead me astray, I'll just calmly call them back and go on. You see what I mean? But what is important is that acceptance and self-acceptance is not an easy process. You have to work for it mostly, probably. And it's the only way you can make progress. You have to start where you are. So when you do introspection, okay, you can compare it to a navigation system. I can actually read that passage since this is also a book presentation. Oops. I'll find it, don't worry. Do you recall how we previously compared the teachings to the navigation system in your car? You only need to declare or type in the destination and then follow the instructions. Extending this metaphor, you will probably need a car with a gear stick. So I'm sorry. You have to go to Europe in order to. Because during this journey of self-inquiry, you must use both feet to move forward. Okay, so in a car with a gear stick, you use 2 feet. In a car without gear stick, you use only 1 foot. And also, you should know how and when to change gears by learning to listen to the sound of your inner engine. Right? So otherwise you're going, ooh, ooh. No, hold on, you need to change gears, okay? Then the task is to remain attentive to the spoken instructions from your navigation system. If you fail to follow the instructions, owing to either incomplete understanding or distracted attention, there will be no eternal hellfire for you. No need for mea culpa or for self-chastisement. Even if you drift away for miles from your final destination, all the system will do is recalculate and instruct you how to move closer again. To complete the metaphor, in the process of drifting away from your destination instead of moving closer to it, you may find fewer gas stations along the road, so that's a problem. You might even reach the point of seeking the next station while proceeding on foot with an empty fuel can, if you have one with you. Thus, time may be lost through failure to follow the instructions and perhaps even more time to get back on the right trajectory again. However, a feature of the spiritual journey is that with each inch of progress towards your goal, you will receive more fuel, more energy, and more joy, hardly perceptible at the beginning, and then steadily increasing with each step forward. Okay? So that is what Master always says. Spiritual path, it's not that you find the joy only at the end. You already have it, and you just need to become as sensitive to it as you can to enjoy it more. Okay? The instruction for sadhana is that we practice the techniques, and then the meditation begins. And I am much of a do person, action person, so I find that in some way, sometimes the hardest part to just not get up after my techniques and dive into my work of the day's work, because I'm also enthusiastic about that. But so I'm training myself. I use, sometimes I use a Kriya app that I have on my cell phone, and so not less than 20 minutes, sit still, and then I understand why. Okay, because if you take that at heart and you don't get up and you sit, then there are subtle forms of enjoyment that you cannot have if you stand up and run away immediately. Okay, so let me see if I'd written anything else, and otherwise we can do one more of those meannesses and you can choose which one. Grief. Well, I had written something about racism. Would you like me to talk about that? Okay. Because it is important, right? At the moment also, it is important. So, first of all, getting back to that teaching about pure ideas, okay? So it is important for all of us to understand that in a battle between opposite forces, who wins? So suppose you have a battle between a good person and a bad person, okay? Who wins? It's a question that I'm asking you. The one who has the most magnetism. So you don't, the fact that you're good doesn't give you anything, doesn't guarantee anything. Even though we may also say that goodness means magnetism, because then you are not just mediocre in your goodness, you are powerful in your goodness, you're connecting. Your goodness comes from a spiritual power, like Theresa Neumann from Germany, where Master goes to visit her. I visited her house, maybe now 8 years ago, And we were traveling, my companion and I, giving classes, and we were in Austria, and then in 2 days later we would have a class in northern Germany. So there was time to make a detour and visit her house, which is in Bavaria at about 10 kilometers, which is probably 7 miles from the border with the Czech Republic. And so I did it was really like, an inspiration of the moment. So I went very ardently on internet, and I found a number. They gave me a number of a man who had the key to that house. And he spoke, and I speak German, but not Bavarian. And he had a Bavarian accent or dialect. And by some miracle, I understood what he said. He said, "Don't come after lunch," because he wanted to have his lunch. So we arrived there, and he came, and he showed us the house, told us many stories about Teresa. He had known her. And what I found out is that she had disciples, first of all, and Hitler did not want to oppose her. So one time the SS came to her house, and I think she herself opened the door with bleeding hands, and and they ran away scared. She had the wounds of the stigma of Christ on her body. They ran away. And then they tried to kill her a second time at the end of the war, when the American army was approaching Konnersreuth, and they wanted to kill her so that they could accuse the Americans. Okay, so this was a false flag operation, as they call it. And so they tried, but she knew, and she just hid, and they couldn't find her. And then the army freed her, and she became very good friends with many American soldiers, especially African American soldiers, because she had wanted to go to Africa as a young woman. That had been her dream. But what we also learned is that she had disciples, and she sent them to die. So there was one man, his name was Fritz Gerlich, and he was an intellectual, and he had gone to interview her, and he was a Protestant, and so he thought, I'm going to denounce this fraud. But he didn't. He became a disciple. He converted to Catholicism, and she said to him, "You must continue to denounce their crimes." So now we're talking about 1932. And Hitler came to power in 1933. She said, "It's too late, it will not help, but you must do it for you." So he went back to Munich, and he was a good writer, prolific writer. He started a magazine, and he started writing these articles denouncing the crimes of the Nazis. And of course, when Hitler came to power, he could have fled. He refused to go to Switzerland, and they arrested him and killed him in a concentration camp. So that was magnetism. That man had magnetism and power. But how did we get to this? And she had magnetism. So what gives us magnetism? And that is very important to understand, that what gives us magnetism now, it can be that you must stand up and speak. Okay, that can be important if you have, but it's not, it has to be done from what I said before, the realm of ideas. That has power. And when you are, one of the characteristics when a thought that comes to you is not just reactive or an emotion, is that you have no need to convince other people. You don't feel that need, and you won't even say it unless people want to hear it. There is that calmness, that indifference, okay? So to be on the good side in modern history now, magnetism, spiritual magnetism, is in itself the most important force. And we have that, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, you want to say anything about that before I continue? Or ask? Yes.
First of all, I agree with what you're saying there. But yesterday I was walking my dog,
Mm-hmm.
and we live very close to the central library here. And there was all these horns bonking, and there were people chanting, and it was a rally. Basically, it was an anti-Trump rally.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like we were each doing what we were supposed to be doing. I was walking my dog. I wasn't participating in the rally, although spiritually, I felt good. I felt in my heart that this is good that there's people out there doing that, even though it's not my mind to do. So to be accepting of what's going on and being supportive of that.
Thank you very much. So what Jyotish says is, if you feel that it is your dharma, so your dharma, Hanuman was not just walking the dog. Your dharma is the life that you lead. Okay, so you have a certain aura, certain magnetism. You're part of a family that embraces truth and peace and love and all those things. And that is your dharma, and you live that, and that's why you could feel at peace with what you were doing. Okay, but Jyotish says sometimes if you feel that it's your dharma to also be specific and speak up, then do it, but do it with that calmness that we've been talking about. Does that make sense? Do you want to say anything? No. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. There was a story about an ancient, in the history of the Roman Republic, Cincinnatus. So Cincinnati, the city here, was called after him. He just loved to be in the silence of his own land and house, and he loved working in the garden. And it was the war, the Punic, what do you call it? The Punic Wars, yeah. And so they needed him because he was they knew he was an excellent general. And he said, I'm so happy. Why do you disturb me? And they convinced him, said, this is a duty you have towards your fatherland, and do it. So he did it, beat the enemy, and then went back to his garden, and in the peace of his, didn't make any difference for him. So that is the type of stoic courage that we want to strive. We also need to be very, very courageous, of course. When we need it, yeah. So about racism, yeah, I have, when you talk about these things, then everything else seems to become less important. So what does racism really refer back to? It is a heritage from Kali Yuga. Swami Sri Yukteswar speaks about the yugas. Probably you have all studied them. And so we have just entered the second of 4 eras. And the first era, Kali Yuga, was the one with the most, the lowest, where the human consciousness was really, really low and was unable to look beyond appearances. So the substance was not seen. The content was not seen, okay? And I came to define by myself racism, basically not only to judge people according to their race or their position in society, for example, but just even when you judge people about their appearance in general. That's racism, because you're not looking at the content. Okay, the words come from Dr. King himself. He says, time will come when we no longer judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's a historical speech. And we can change that. where you just say, when we will no longer judge people by their appearance, but by the content of their character. Or if you want to make it even more yogic, by their magnetism or by their, by their aura, their magnetism, their consciousness, that's it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so it goes much deeper than that. Then it is important to understand that Sri Yukteswar could also speak from personal experience, because his country had been invaded by the English, okay, and they treated Indians, like it or not, as second-hand citizens, because they were Indians and not English. So he could see it every day. When he passed away before India was freed. So for him, the colonialism and racism was a real reality. It was a concrete reality. So when we train ourselves, and that I haven't worked very hard on this one, but first of all, racism is much more subtle than you think. So Uma spoke, I was giving a class with her, I was translating her, and she mentioned a quiz that you can do, and you have to answer a question, and so friends of her did it, and they turned out to be racist. So you think you're not. And then what do? You work on it, you try again, and they had to do this same quiz quite a few times, and then they had learned something. Isn't that interesting? So that is the first thing. But also, when you train yourself not to look at people's appearance, but to develop intuition for what is inside them, really, again, on a very subtle level, there is more joy. Because when you look at people's appearance, then there is, there can be sensual pleasure or desire or whatever. Famous people are often also beautiful people. Great actors, they become models, and so. But what do they really have to teach us? What do you have you really? I mean, if they're good actors, of course, that's a good thing. They can do good things with that. But learning to go through life and look at other people, but try to go beyond the physical appearance, that means overcoming the meanness of racism. At least that's my humble interpretation. But I agree, it's not always easy. Not even when I look at myself in the mirror, I think you're a racist because you don't like what you see there. Okay. Right. I would be happy to, if you want me to, I can sign the book for you. And if you have it, of course. I think there are still a few copies for sale. Do you have it in the bookstore? I don't think we do yet, but I'm just going to order with Narnia. Okay. Do they have it? Yeah, they do print on demand, I think, right, with old books. So, but if you order it, they will bring it. Absolutely. So it was a great joy to write the book. It's also a great joy to speak about these things and to share them with people. And if your work is like I spoke with Valerie this morning, you work with grief and so forth, it doesn't take away anything like that, but it can give you something to focus on. So when you work on yourself, that is the whole thing when you do introspection. It's not just looking at yourself and say, oh yeah, of course you have a trauma. That's what happened when you were young, something like that. But there also has to be the recognition that you can, from there, focus on things that keep you, that help you to expand away from that original pain. Okay? So it was a great joy for me to write it and also to be able to share it. And I hope I will be able to write another book about the first chapter of the Holy Science. And thank you. Thank you very much. Jai Guru. Okay. and see you tomorrow maybe for Sunday service, right?
He will be here tomorrow for Sunday service, so